Hello and welcome to the Browns Blitz. Today is Tuesday, April 20th. I'm your host, Rod Bloom. Joining me today is my brother, Jeff. How are things going with you, Jeff?
Going good, Rod. Looking forward to talking some draft, which is just around the corner now.
That's right. And to help us do that, we have special guest back joining us at a very busy time of the year for him. That's Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Emory, how are you?
I'm doing fine. I appreciate you guys bringing me on the show.
Absolutely. I know you love this time of year. I know you work year round at this stuff. So we're dying to hear what you think of the class and everything, and kind of look at maybe the Browns perspective and so forth. But we're gonna do it a little bit different this time. Jeff has been diving very deeply into this draft class this year. So I am going to turn over the pulpit or the microphone to Jeff. Jeff's going to ask you some questions.
Oh boy, I hope that's not setting the bar too high, Emory. Because I'm not a professional at this, but I will say that I've spent a lot more time on this than I ever have in the past, and that that's not saying a lot, but just based on what's happened over the last year. I think we talked about a year ago, Emory, and we were just kind of entering lockdown, and we were all figuring out how to use Zoom, I think, or at least I was. What kind of effect has that had on how you've prepared for the draft, if any?
It hadn't really affected me. The only difference this year is that I wasn't able to go to the different All-Star games the month of January, nor work during broadcast like I normally do, because primarily the schools that I broadcast are in the spring, and even in the spring I was only able to do a couple games because one of the other schools decided not to play. So outside of just not traveling, that has been the biggest change. But other than that, I've been able to keep my process as efficient as possible throughout just watching film.
Cool. Yeah, I wonder, if players opting out, shortened seasons, what kind of an impact do you think that may have had on teams' ability to evaluate players? I mean, is it hard to look at a guy from 2019 film and project what he's going to look like in 2021?
Not necessarily. It depends on the position and also at what age was the guy. Let's say for Panay Sewell, a guy that was 19 the last time you saw him play. So you didn't really see a development year this past season. So you have to project a lot in that regard because he was 19. It wasn't like a junior that opted out this year. So you got 3 years of film on him. So in certain spots, it had to have been tougher for scouts, but in other spots, it's just business as usual because you are what you are by the time you get to your junior year. There's no real change in your skill set. Situations may change, but skill set truly doesn't.
Okay. So as far as that's concerned, then this year's draft, really, there aren't as many or there aren't any new unknowns versus the past?
No, not really. I don't believe so.
Okay, good. We as Browns fans, we've talked about this a lot. I think are used to the draft being our Super Bowl. Pretty much anybody under 40 years old doesn't remember what it's like to be drafting players that we didn't expect to start immediately. So we're kind of having to be retrained how to think about the draft this year, I think. So it's kind of good that we talk about measuring expectations a little bit, and I hope you can give us some help with that. how to approach a draft, thinking not necessarily about, how a guy is going to impact us this year, but maybe how he's going to impact us next year and in the following years. I was just thinking about a couple of guys that we hear thrown out a lot as potential picks for the Browns at the bottom of the first round. Neither of these guys may be there. Both of them may be there. But people have tended to gravitate toward the linebacker position for the Browns. Obviously, a huge area of need last season. And I just want to get your thoughts on Zaven Collins, and I'll call him JOK because it's easier to say than his full name, Karamoa out of Notre Dame. Both these guys are kind of hybrids, I guess you would call them, or in the case of Collins, more of a throwback. If you're Andrew Berry and you're faced with the difficult choice of both of those guys being there, which one do you think is going to be a better fit for the type of safety-heavy defense that we are planning to operate? At least we think we're planning to operate.
Well, it depends, because I think the Browns have good depth at that position already. If you're planning to play heavy safeties, you already have Ronnie Harrison, you got Grant Delpit coming back healthy, and you brought in John Johnson. So I would think that safety may be a little bit stacked in that regard. And I kind of like Phillips, the linebacker you drafted last year out of LSU. And Taki made some plays, so you expect him to continue to grow. And Anthony Walker, you guys bring over from Indianapolis. But if you had to choose between the two, I would probably lean towards someone like Zaven Collins, because he's a good coverage guy. He's good as a Sam backer. He's good as an inside backer. He's good as a weak side backer. He can play an assortment of positions at the second level. And if you want him to play that nickel backer, you're kind of in good shape because he can cover. He's got good football instincts. And I know Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah has the athleticism and the ability to match up. But I think if you're trying to view him in the scope of being a safety, I think I don't think he'll be able to play because there's too many, quality safeties are already on the Browns roster, in my opinion.
Sure. Okay. So just
almost duplicating efforts.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. So just staying on linebacker for a second. Assuming the Browns went another direction early in the draft and we were looking for somebody to augment our linebacker room, who are the guys in the middle part of the draft that would for instance, see playing time ahead of a Jacob Phillips, maybe not necessarily this year, but in the next year or two? And I'm thinking of guys that, we hear names like Jabril Cox at the sort of the high end of that, second, third round, or guys like Chaz Surratt, maybe closer to the third or fourth round.
Surratt probably would be my preference there because he's a very good athlete, former quarterback, and like, Zaven Collins can play across the board. He can play any one of the three backer spots. And so you get someone that has a good understanding of offensive football because of his background as a quarterback. So, I would probably lean that way more so than anything. Cox to me is a little bit more one-dimensional, solid cover guy. He can find his way to get his hand on a lot of passes, which is good. So he'd be almost like a sub-package player. But if you're looking for someone that can stay on the field, I believe Surratt gives you more of what you want than a guy like Cox.
Okay, cool. Okay, so jumping back to the early part of the draft, obviously we've had some changes over the last couple of weeks. Well, actually, the last week or so on our defensive line. Yeah. Right.
A couple days.
Big changes the last day or two on our defensive line. I mean, going into last season, Rod and I talked a lot about our defensive line as being the anchor of our defense. We were really excited about, we're going to set a team sack record with these guys. And now, looking back, we're basically, other than Myles Garrett, that defensive line is gone. We're replacing 3 of our 4 starters. So we've added Jadeveon Clowney. We've got a couple of guys, added to that defensive tackle position, and Andrew Billings, who opted out last year, and we brought in Malik Jackson. Then we had Jordan Elliott from last year's draft. Who do you see as a guy who would really impact that group this year, that would be there at 26?
I would say if you're trying to go D tackle, maybe Davion Nixon out of Iowa or Levy Onwuzurike out of Washington. It'd be interesting to see how Jordan Elliott progresses this year. Big fan of what he did at Missouri. But defensive tackle outside of those 2 that I mentioned, that would be the only ones you could probably sell me on day 1 at pick 26.
Okay. So if I go that route, if I'm Andrew Berry and I take one of those guys early, now my other big need is cornerback. Rod and I have talked a bit about, we're putting a lot of weight on Greedy Williams coming back, on Grant Delpit coming back in our secondary. I'm a big fan of having some insurance policies back there. If I'm taking one of those D tackles early, and now my next pick is at 59, assuming we don't move up or alter our draft position in any way, that puts us down into the middle range of the cornerbacks that are going to be available, right? Obviously, most of the top guys are going to be gone early in the second round, I think. But it seems like there's probably 15 or so cornerbacks in this draft that project as fairly near-term starters, right? So who do you think would be the right guy for us, knowing that we have, in terms of a need at the number 2 cornerback outside? We brought in Troy Hill, to play the slot and to fill in at times. Denzel Ward gets hurt from time to time. Who's the guy that you would really like us to zero in on at 59?
If he's still around, I would probably go with Cameron Bynum out of Cal. I just like his ball skills. I like his aggressiveness. I like how he's able to play well and press, and just has the right temperament and mindset to play out there on a perimeter. I think he's one of the more underrated players at the position in the class. You also look at Zach Mcpherson out of Texas Tech, another athletic guy that has good football skill set. Someone that you could tell played a lot of football coming up, and it shows out there on the field. And so for me, it's just about finding guys that can take the ball away that match up athletically. But I would probably zero in on Cameron Bynum if he's there, because he has the length, he has the athleticism, and the ball skills to really be an impact player.
Okay. Where do you have him rated versus the 2 corners from Georgia, Stokes and Campbell?
Bynum, I have a higher grade on Bynum. I believe Bynum is one of the more technically sound players. And for me, I'm not as high on the Georgia guys. Georgia guys have, really good athleticism, right?
Okay.
They can match up. But right now, Bynum is my 3rd boundary corner. Then Mcpherson is 4th. Then you go Calvin Joseph and Newsom, and then you get to Stokes at number 7. But the gap between Bynum and Stokes, in my opinion, is a big one. So, Calvin Joseph out of Kentucky could be a guy that he has upside. I believe he was an LSU transfer, had a really solid season with Kentucky. He looked good on tape. Newsom, I know people are high on. He may go in the first round, but I would probably zero in on Bynum if you're talking about pick 59.
lot of people have us taking Newsom at 26. And I'm also seeing some mocks where Caleb Farley actually falls that far because of the back issue. What are your thoughts on those two guys in the first round?
I love Farley. I got a high grade on Farley. Farley is my number one actually boundary corner.
Okay.
If he checks out medically to be good to go, and like all reports are saying he should be ready to go for July and August, that's the guy to get, because he has the athleticism, the premier ball skills, the A+ instincts, and he could travel. So that's another element of his game. He's not relegated to one side. If you want him to match up and travel inside with someone, he can do that. You want him on the boundary side or a field side, doesn't matter. He can travel as well. You just hope that he's healthy. And I think because of what just happened with Greedy Williams, it may put the Browns in a situation where they want to shy away from someone that may have a medical risk.
Yeah. Right. I can tell you, I had that surgery, microdiscectomy, 20 years ago. I was a much older guy than Caleb Farley and probably not in nearly as good a shape, but it's not something you just immediately bounce back from. So there's a couple other areas I'd like to get your opinion on, Emory, before we let you go. Two places that we're actually looking for help that most people aren't thinking about right now. And it's on the offensive side of the ball. Most people are sort of projecting the Browns to go real defense heavy this year. But there's a couple areas that I think we're going to be looking for some help in the next couple of seasons. So I'm thinking, we've got picks at 89, 91, and 110 that are kind of bunched close together. And we're looking, I think, for some guys that can step in next year, maybe play a little bit this year, but step in next year and the year after. And those areas would be on the offensive line. Now, obviously, we again, the strength of our team was the offensive line last year, but we're really lacking in depth, particularly not knowing Wyatt Teller's contract status beyond this season. So are there some offensive tackles or maybe guards that you've looked at that you would see as guys who we could develop over the next year or two to sort of fill those roles? And I'm thinking guys like, again, at the high end, somebody like Jackson Carman, who projects to the right tackle or right guard, or a guy I really have kind of been fascinated with is James Hudson out of Cincinnati.
If you're talking guards, I'm a big fan of Tristan Hodge out of BYU. And if he's there, when you had those clusters of picks, Hodge would be a guy that I definitely would target, because he was just phenomenal on film. You saw a lot of time that Zach Wilson had back there in the pocket. You also saw just the amount of effort he showed in the run game, which created a lot of space for Algieri to do what he does out there running the football. So Tristan Hodge would be the guard that I would target. And I like two tackles. I like Josh Ball out of Marshall. I think he's outstanding and underrated. And I also feel as though someone like Deontay Smith from East Carolina could be a nice target as well. He's a linear guy, but he did add some weight when he got down to the Senior Bowl. So he went from 275 to about 295. And Josh Ball at 6'7", 309 was outstanding for the Thundering Herd. And you talk about someone that can do it well on both ends. They ran a lot behind him, and he was a left tackle. So that tells you all you need to know about what he brings to the table. Robert Jones from Middle Tennessee State would be excellent as well. So he played right tackle for Middle Tennessee State, but I think he's best suited to kick inside at guard. But you look at someone that had Jedrick Wills type skill set, I think that's someone also that you want to keep an eye on. So I think this is a really deep group of prospects at both guard and tackle. So I'm excited to see how it all lays out.
Do you think 89 to 110 is realistic for some of those guys or most of those guys? Is that where most of them will end up going?
Well, I don't know. It all depends on who gets drafted earlier. Right. So I can only evaluate the talent. I can't guess in play like
runs.
I know where guys are gonna go. Anybody that does that is lying to you. So all we could do is just evaluate the talent, and wherever they get picked, I could tell you how good or how bad the player is. But I will say this in that regard: if whoever starts, I guess whichever position gets the run on early, we know we're going to see a run on quarterbacks in probably the top 6, right? Then we'll probably see a run on, the top tier tackles, maybe like 3 or 4 tackles. Then we'll see probably a mix of skill players where you'll see a Kyle Pitts and the receivers start to go. Then you'll start to see some premier corners go. So what I said all that to say, that's like 15 or so positions. So what you're doing is pushing everything down 15 or so slots. We know running backs probably going to go in abundance in the 2nd and 3rd round. So yeah, you may get to that 3rd round range, 4th round range, and still have some really good offensive linemen on the board, unless you see a run on O linemen start early, and you see guys that probably were slated to be in the 2nd round go in the 1st round. So it all depends on which position gets that early run.
Okay, fair enough. And the last one I want to ask you about is wide receiver. Obviously, we have a couple of really talented guys who are making a lot of money for us right now. And I think developing a 3rd guy has to be pretty important to us over the next couple of seasons as we start to face some salary cap issues. Who do you see in that same sort of range who can give us some size and some speed?
Well, there's a ton of guys. I think size and speed is in abundance in this class. I'm a big fan of what they bring to the table down there at UAB. There was a couple of guys at UAB that were really good athletically, and starting with their first, Austin Watkins, Jr. He's 6'3", 210, blistering speed. Isaiah McCoy, local kid from Kent State, can definitely fly. You look at Josh Emory out of Illinois. So you can there's a lot of these big body guys that can run, that can hold their own. Some on the outside, but we know you got versatile options in both Landry and Odell Beckham that can play inside or outside. So you can kind of play with the positioning of these receivers that I mentioned, McCoy, Watkins, and Emory all have enormous speed, athleticism. And I think they do a great job of playing the ball when it's in the air.
I'm rooting for Isaiah McCoy by virtue of the fact that he comes from my alma mater, and we don't have a lot of football things to be proud about down there. So
not since Josh Krebs, not a whole lot, huh?
Right. Okay. Hey, Emory, I know we've kept you a while, and we don't want to monopolize your time here. Is there any other parting wisdom you want to give us Browns fans about the upcoming draft?
I like the Browns roster. I think the Browns have a really good roster in the secondary, to be honest. And I think, when you look at that secondary being all health permitting, being really good, that helps you out in today's game. The offense is going to be the offense with Chubb and Hunt and that offensive line and those tight ends you guys have. I like the Browns setup. They're built to sustain success. And so when you're able to run the football, play good defense, you're going to be in a lot of games. So we'll see if that can continue. The defensive line, like you said, is going to be the challenge to try to find some youthful energy to inject in there. You don't know which Jadeveon Clowney you're going to get. And so there is some questions on the defensive line. But, if you're running the football and you're playing the position game, the field position game like they did last year, and granted, their defensive line was really good last year, but I do think the Browns being in the playoffs is going to be something that's going to not be, a fly by night. They're going to be consistent. Now, how far they go will depend on how well Baker can continue to progress. And, maybe that defense gets a little bit more aggressive up front. So we'll see. But right now, I think the Browns can go into this draft not looking for saviors and looking for more so, good rotational players to help fill out the roster.
Amen to that.
Right. Emory,
we appreciate your time.
Thank you guys for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Sure thing. Emory, everybody can follow you at FBallGamePlan. Just real quick, are you doing the mock drafts this year?
No, this year I'm not. I've been tied up significantly doing a lot of different things with regard to football game plan and CBS Sports HQ. So didn't have the time to put together a 7-round mock. Plus, I think this year kind of pushed it back a little bit because of we got the late start, I believe, and it's a free agency, and then it just kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah. Okay, well, everybody can definitely give you a follow there and catch up with all that you're doing. But we appreciate you stopping by and filling us in on all the good stuff, Emory. Great talking to you.
Thank you,
guys. Stay well, Emory.
Thank you. I look forward to being out there in Cleveland for the draft. I will be on day 3 coverage for CBS Sports HQ, so looking forward to it.
Sounds great.
Excellent. Well, there was a lot there, Jeff.
Right. A lot to unpack, huh?
Yeah. So you want to go back to any of the guys that Emory talked about, or anything that he said in particular, and discuss? Is there anything special, top of your head, that kind of stood out that he talked about, or any of the players?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of that discussion of our first 2 picks, one of the things that I've sort of been going back and forth on is when you look at the defensive tackle class. I mean, in terms of guys who are rated as potential starters, it's only 5 or 6 guys right now. Cornerback, as we mentioned, there's a lot more guys that are viewed right now as potential starters. So what I'm wrestling with is which need is more important for us to fill right now. Do we take a cornerback high and hope that one of those top D tackles falls to 59? Which it's possible because, again, it's just not a really highly rated class. So maybe you do end up with, a Milton Williams, or I thought it was interesting that Emory mentioned Nixon. Davian Nixon out of Iowa. Guy I've kind of been watching a little bit. I would love to see one of those guys at 59, but I'm just kind of concerned that we're going to get to 59 and none of those top D tackles are going to be there. In which case, I think Andrew Berry just shifts gears and he looks at, the best available player, right? But in terms of trying to fill our needs in this draft, I think the top 2 are now cornerback and defensive tackle. Last time we did a podcast, it was edge or defensive end and cornerback, and that's flipped now based on adding Clowney and releasing Richardson. So if we're trying to solve all the Browns' problems, to me, that's the interesting conversation to have. Which position do you take first?
Yeah, well, let me ask you this. Which position is most likely to be there closer to 59, to where you're going to have the quality guy that you want at 59?
Well, I think there are a lot of cornerbacks. It may not be, it may not be the cornerback that you identified as being the perfect fit. Okay, I mean, Emory. If Emory's saying it's Cam Bynum, maybe it's somebody else. I'm thinking like a guy named Fetu Melifonwu. Kevin Joseph. Those are guys that are projected to be there around 59 most places. But man, it's so weird when you look at all the different projections. I mean, sometimes guys are rated as first rounders, and sometimes they're rated as third or fourth rounders. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at with Emory is that unusual because of what's happened this year, or is that just kind of normal for how players get ranked in advance of the draft? And you and I just have never gone really that deeply into, players in the, second round and beyond.
Here's my thought on that. You've got a lot of guys who opted out or didn't play a lot of games last year. So there's, less film, more reliance on guys' prior seasons.
Mm-hmm.
You've also got a lot of guys, you're going based on their pro days at home, where everybody's running a 4.3 or 4.4, and and everybody looks like a first rounder. So there's a lot more equality, across the board, just amongst these guys to start with. Guys look a lot more generic based on those things. So I think it takes a better eye to pick out, which the top prospects are. I mean, obviously, you still know which guys are the definite first rounders, but beyond that, I think it's harder to decide if a guy's a second rounder or a fourth rounder, and it's we're not going to know that until these guys pick.
Right.
My thought on the Browns is that I think Andrew Berry's going to let the draft kind of come to him, but he's probably got, obviously they've got their board, and they've probably got 2-3 guys they really, really like that are hoping will be either there at 26 or maybe make it down to 20, 23 to where they can try to go up and get them. Maybe they've already talked to some teams, to see if there would be a possibility of a trade, just to test the waters.
Right.
But the way I think is they may have, I'm sure they've got, and I'm definitely simplifying things here, but they've probably got 2 or 3 plans in place. I mean, realistically, they've probably got 100 plans in place. But
right.
One plan might be, okay, we're going to wait, and and if this DT that we want falls to 26, we're going to take him. Okay, but if one of our top 4 corners is there, we're going to take the corner over the DT. Okay, well, if they take the DT, then they've already decided that they are going to use some of their draft capital to move up in the second round to go get to go get a top corner, because they figure that that's a need that they definitely want to address. Whereas they might feel that if they take the corner in the first round, that it's not worth moving up in the second round to go after the DT.
No, I think that's very good points.
But I played with the draft value charts just a little bit. You mentioned trading with the Jaguars, and there's other teams obviously. So the Browns, I looked at the Browns trading with the Jags and ending up at 125 and 213. Okay. And obviously they could say a 126. This would put them at 125. It cost them 20 points, which is a their fifth rounder to move up to 125. And they would move from, all the way up from, from or the 259 up to 245. So they're moving up 14 spots in the second round, and it would cost them their 2 third rounders and their 5th, 6th, and 7th. They would still have their 2 fourth rounders. So they would end up with their 1st, their 2nd, and their 2 fourth rounders. And they would get their 2 studs that they wanted. A guy at 125 and a guy high in the second round at 213. And they would still have picks 4.5 and 4.8, to go after, the offensive lineman that they want, and whatever else, whether it's
right,
wide receiver or whatever else. Yeah.
Right. Don't the Jags also don't they have another pick in the second round?
I think they have a lower pick, yeah. And obviously, the lower the Browns go in the second round, they can. Then you're looking at them keeping a third rounder, and so forth. So even if they stayed at 126, you're talking about them keeping their fifth rounder, and that gives them 5 picks.
Mm-hmm.
So it just depends what they want to do, but they've got enough capital to move pretty much anywhere they want in that second round, and still keep a few picks. It just depends on if they want to keep their 2 third rounders, a third and a fourth, 2 fourth rounders. Like you said, those picks are bundled enough together that they're all fairly equal. A low third and 2, actually right. 2 low thirds and a high fourth. So
right,
you would probably feel pretty good if they kept 1. Go ahead.
I was thinking of this scenario also where, maybe if we're sitting at 26 and we're saying, geez, there's, a bunch of players there that we view as pretty much all the same. We could trade down with the Jags to their first pick in the second round, which is 33, and yeah. move our second round pick up to their pick at 13, which is the 45th overall pick, where we were at the 59th overall pick. And I think that would cost us a third rounder, maybe a little something else.
Okay. So you're talking having 2-1 and 2-13 and then having the rest of your picks other than the third.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense.
What that does for us is gets us into that range mid-second round where I think most of the second tier cornerbacks are going to go, and a lot of other really good players as well. My concern is once we get down to the bottom of the second round, it's going to be slim pickings for us in areas of need. And the expectation for guys to come in and be able to contribute in year one is significantly lower, I think, than guys who are graded, high enough to be first year contributors, which, I think first year contributors in this draft are pretty much down through the middle of the second round.
Yeah. Well, the Browns have enough capital to be able to move where they want. I mean, they're obviously not going to wind up with 3 first-round picks in this draft, but they can. No. They could certainly probably get 3 second-round picks if they really wanted to. Pretty easily, I think. And
that's kind of the point, right? We don't need first-round picks at this point. Aside from the questions around Greedy and Grant Delpit, and being a little thin at the defensive tackle, I think this roster is pretty much ready to go. And I saw something the other day where somebody said, "Oh, this is now a top 5 roster in the NFL on paper." Well, maybe a little early to be evaluating them that way, but on paper, it looks like we've got a lot of these holes filled, right? So
it does.
We really can. We really, Andrew Berry really can go best player available at every single pick and not get hurt right now. But that's kind of what's fun about being fans, right? Is we get to project what the perfect draft would look like. It's not a lot of fun to say, well, just he's the best player, we'll take him. You want to come up with the perfect draft, and maybe that's why we are always disappointed on draft day, because we never have the perfect draft. But we can sort of look at what we think would fill the maximum amount of needs this year and in the next couple years. Like we've talked about, roster transition and where do we need to be developing guys. It's upgrading the bottom third of the roster and anticipating future needs. That's what this draft is about right now, in my mind.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about 26, but you make a good point in trading into the second round, because look at the difference in the contract for a guy who signed in the first round, even probably at 26. We're used to guys being signed up near the top of the first round, but even at 26, I'm sure there's a pretty good difference between a guy taking a 26 and a guy taking a 33.
Yeah, I mean, look at what we're paying David Njoku this year versus Nick Chubb.
Yeah.
They're a year apart, but
it's
huge.
It's different. So if you can get guys in the second round, and if you have a GM like Andrew Berry and you have a good staff who can pick these guys out, why not use that to your advantage and try to get into some of these contracts that are going to be 4-year contracts where you're paying these guys $1 million or less for the next 4 years.
Yep.
And and you hit on whatever. If you draft 5 guys and you hit on 3 of them, man, you're really helping yourself with your salary cap.
For sure. And even if only a couple of these mid-rounders, again, that 89, 91, and 110 overall picks is sort of the sweet spot for what Andrew Berry is going to do with this draft. Those 3 picks are really looking toward 2022 and 2023, when we're starting to have to make some of those roster decisions based on who gets extended, et cetera. So, picking guys like a developmental offensive lineman who, if for some reason we have to replace somebody, maybe J.C. Treader gets too expensive, or Joel Bitonio gets too expensive. Or, like we've said, we can't work out the right deal with Wyatt Teller. Maybe we're set at tackle for the next 2 or 3 years, but drafting a tackle who can come in and step in 2 years on the interior, and then maybe move out to the right tackle position down the road, is really thinking ahead when you look at the middle rounds of this draft. And I think Emory said the same thing, that there's some really interesting guys that project to being able to do that. Available in the later rounds, I think.
Yeah, it sounds like he really likes the class there. So, and we've talked about it, but you need, when you're looking at making a run, you need quality backups, and pretty much across the board.
Yeah.
You need somebody. You need guys who are ready to step in. You can't have your season derailed because you lose one guy and you just don't have a solid backup, whether it's one of your tackles or anywhere.
Look what our defense looks like when Denzel Ward doesn't play.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a huge drop off when Denzel Ward doesn't play. When Myles Garrett doesn't play. I mean, I think there were a couple of games where, other guys stepped up, but it's a big drop off, that's the next evolution, I think, in the Browns roster. Now that they've got this core of talented guys, how do you get, we had a guest a few weeks ago, I think it was Coach Tolliver, say, you need to be able to bring in a B+ guy, right?
Yeah.
Hey, that's what we're looking for, I think, in this draft.
And it's just not easy to keep a team, together and have that quality throughout the roster. So you really have to give Andrew Berry credit, because guys get expensive. If guys are good backups, they're going to leave and get a payday somewhere else, and you have to continually be able to have the wisdom and the ability to bring in guys who can can keep the roster at that level.
Right.
And it's something that it's something we haven't even been close to in Cleveland before.
Right.
Just talking about bringing in good backups, it's kind of just it's
well,
it's
we've seen it with the signings this year, and Clowney's just the latest one. But the reason that these guys are signing here is because they believe that the Browns will win. That just wasn't an option in the past. Not to mention the fact that in a COVID year we're getting these guys at discounts. Okay, I mean they're coming here because they want to win, and you've now established that as part of your business model as well. I think 2 years now we've seen that this is how Andrew Berry's going to operate. When there's an area of need, he's going to go out and find free agents on team-friendly prove-it deals to hold down that position. And you know what? It may be that left defensive end or edge is just one of those positions that every year we bring in whatever guy we like that year in the free agent market, and we may never have a long-term guy over there. As an example.
Well, yeah, because you think about it, you take another defensive end in the first round, and in 5 years you're paying them huge money again. Whereas they're bringing these guys in on pretty good deals.
Right.
So, the financial side of it again is something we've never really had to look at, because the Browns just, they would just let these guys walk because they were continuously rebuilding.
Yep.
So now you've got these decisions to make, and speaking of finances and decisions, Andrew Berry made a statement with Sheldon Richardson. So I don't know what all went on there. I assume they tried to get him to restructure. They must have at least talked to him, and he must have said no. I don't know how many chances they gave him. They were like, all right, we'll see you then.
Right.
So. They're making it sound like like the door's open. So I don't know if they're talking about bringing him back already, or if he's looking around and the Browns already made him an offer or whatnot. He'd certainly be a good guy to have back, and if the Browns bring him back, again, don't know if this would happen before draft day or not. So
I think.
At
this point, they're probably going to wait until after the draft.
Yeah, so the draft,
see where the rest of these guys settle out.
Yeah, so the draft could impact whether he even has a spot on available to him or not. So do you think any of the other guys who are in a similar position to Sheldon Richardson with these big contracts, who the Browns could clear some salary cap with? You think any of them are in danger this season, Jeff?
Well, we've talked before about David Njoku. He's got a pretty significant bump this year. I think the $6 million, somewhere in that range.
I would have to look. My understanding is that money is pretty much guaranteed now, or more of the majority of it is.
Yeah, we're probably past the window, right?
Yeah, I think so. So I think he's pretty much here now.
Yeah. I think, when you look at where we were last year versus this year, Andrew Berry has pretty much taken money that was committed last year and committed it again this year. He hasn't really gone, and that was part of the reason for, I think the Richardson move was, he wanted to maintain that flexibility, because we were pretty much capped out before that move. By the time you sign all of the rookie pool and take care of everything else leading up to the start of the season, we had no more flexibility. So, it depends if they see somebody else out there after the draft that it really feels like they need this year to contend. If they don't get the right couple of guys at the top of the draft, if something else causes the plan to go off the rails, there may be another move down the road that would necessitate them going back and renegotiating with somebody like Jarvis Landry. To change the structure of the deal. And I think the way they're doing it now is interesting with voidable years, where it really doesn't change the money that the player gets. It just sort of is an accounting trick. But the NFL has said that's okay. So they push some of that money out to later.
The salary cap's really an imaginary thing.
Yeah, I mean, it pushes that money out to later so that, it doesn't affect you this year, but it's kind of like, taking out a loan. Eventually it comes due, So, I don't know. I don't think there's anybody else right now that it looks like they're going to cut or, make a move like that with. But we'll have to see how the draft pans out and what the roster looks like after that.
Yeah, but like you say, there's always some guys out there available. And if something comes up, or if the right guy is willing to sign the right deal, to where they think it'll help them, you never know. Never know.
Yeah,
it's gonna happen.
Yeah, particularly this season.
Yeah, it's Go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you want to hear my idea of a perfect draft?
Sure. Let's hear it.
All right, so we talked a little bit about the two scenarios for the top two picks, and assuming we don't move. I think when 26 rolls around, the decision is going to be between the top defensive tackle on the board and the top cornerback on the board. Mm-hmm. If you go defensive tackle at 26, you're going cornerback at 59 and vice versa. Okay, so I think the guys that we're looking at there, I've seen some mocks where Christian Barmore falls to us. I think if that happens, it's a no-brainer to take him at 26.
I think so. I think it's probably, I don't know.
Even though there's
20% chance maybe.
Right. There's questions about him and so forth, but, he just projects as one of these freak talents that you build your offensive line around, and with Miles at the edge and him in the middle, we can have a lot of flexibility with who plays that other defensive end spot, right, going forward. So if that happens, then I think or if he's not there, the number two guy, Levi Onwuzurike, is there. I think he's worth taking at 26 as well. If that happens, then we're looking at somebody like, I mentioned Melifonwu, Joseph. Stokes might still be there at the end of the second round. He kind of roller coastered a bit after his pro day. Tyson Campbell, the other guy from Georgia, or the guys that Emory mentioned, right? Mm-hmm. So, that pretty much for me solidifies the first couple of picks, unless something else comes up, like, if Greg Rousseau is still there at 26, I might have a hard time passing on him, just from the standpoint that, he could be our answer at edge. He could also be our answer at tackle, depending on how he evolves over the next couple of years. Does he add some weight? He's played inside. Think of him in an Aaron Donald type of role, but a guy who's 6'7". Okay, yeah. So that's just one wild card that I would have a hard time thinking about. Okay, if he was to drop, I don't think he will. I think he's going to go in the teens. So then that leaves us at our third round pick of the first third round pick at 89. Mm-hmm. I think the decision there is going to revolve around four positions. It's going to be, and you could sort of lump 89, 91, and 110 together with these four positions. linebacker, safety, offensive line, and wide receiver. If a wide receiver is there, like Diami Brown or Nico Collins, one of those guys that we would consider a solid number 2 guy or maybe even a potential number 1 down the road, then you probably take him at 89.
Yeah,
if we don't like our choices for wide receiver, there are good options, or I think there will be good options there at safety and O-line, unless there's a linebacker that Andrew Berry's really in love with. Surratt, I don't think he's going to go early. I think teams just don't have enough tape on him for him to go that early. So he's probably going to be down around that 110 pick. Couple of guys we've talked about a little bit, I think, at safety. Cisco, Andre Cisco is a true free safety, coverage safety, coming off of an ACL that maybe he projects for next year. Or another guy is I have a hard time saying his name, Talanoa Hufanga, out of USC, is sort of a guy who could play either position, and the flexibility like Grant Delpit, I think, is a nice insurance card if he's sitting there. If none of those guys are there, then I think we're going to go find that offensive lineman that we're going to groom as our 6th man to be sort of a jack of all trades on that line. Another thing we can feel pretty confident about saying is that when our line was missing somebody last year, it affected the outcome of the game. So how nice would it be to have a 6th guy that we could feel good about stepping in?
That's true. Yeah.
So those are the 4 positions that I see us looking for a guy with those middle picks in the 3rd and early 4th round. I think at the end of the 4th, we're probably looking for whichever of those guys we didn't get in a more of a project type player. It may be that we find a receiver down there if the guy we like or the guys we liked weren't there earlier. A couple of those offensive tackles will probably go in the later rounds as well. And then there's some interesting things to think about as we get to the end of the draft. Okay. You asked about who might be in danger of being a cap casualty. Well, not this year, but next year, Case Keenum is a guy that we're probably going to be moving away from.
Yeah, I would think so.
Right, and I think they might even do it this year if it wasn't such a big dead money hit. Okay, so
yeah, I think they're into dead money now. I'd have to look at his contract, but I think it's after this year. I think they're pretty good.
Right, that's what I mean. Is we're probably gonna ride through this year with him, but why not consider a guy late in this draft to be our backup next year? Not a guy that we want to come in and groom to be a starter, okay, but a guy who we feel could be a solid backup for us going forward. There's a guy named Jamie Newman who played a couple seasons at Wake Forest, transferred to Georgia last year, and then opted out. So he never played for Georgia, sat out last year. Big, strong kid, good arm, a little bit erratic. But what was the number one thing that Baker struggled with last year? It was 4th and short, right? How many times did Baker bounce off the line 4th and short? Okay,
that's right. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice to have a big, solid backup quarterback to come in. Even if everybody in the world knew what was coming, it'd be kind of like those old Johnny Evans days, right? You see Jamie Newman come up to the line knowing that we're running it down your throat right now. We're getting that 6 inches. Okay?
Well, that's the point. When you have a good offensive line and the right guys there, you should be able to get that every single time. It shouldn't be an issue.
Sometimes it's just a matter of the leg drive of the quarterback.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But anyway, I see that as another area where, we could maybe find a guy late in this draft that would fill that role for us. If not this year, it's going to happen next year.
Right.
I don't see him going out and signing a free agent quarterback next year unless, again, the sky falls and, Baker gets injured or something. Knock on wood.
Yeah.
The other thing is, at the end of the draft, I'm probably going to take another cornerback or safety just for depth. I don't think you can ever have too many of them.
I agree.
And
I agree.
There's some interesting guys, down at the bottom of the draft. But one guy I've looked at, and this is something I don't really understand. Maybe, you can enlighten me on it, but why don't teams draft kickers?
Kickers have to be really, really good to get drafted. I don't know. To me, it seems like there are always a lot of experienced kickers. There is such a surplus of kickers sitting around who have NFL experience.
Yeah,
but just aren't on rosters. Well, I know, but right? It must not be as easy as it looks. That's all I can say. So why draft
somebody? Who are we always counting on at the end of the game to kick a 50-yard field goal to win? I mean, how many games end on a last-second field goal?
Too many.
Lot.
Too many.
Right?
Quite a few. Yeah.
A lot. Yeah, that's kind of what the NFL has become. It's who scores last, right? So, that always boils down to a kicker, and the kicker is sort of like the journeyman pickup that, is one of the last guys you decide to put on the roster, and it's always kind of confused me,
It happens that way in fantasy too. Nobody takes the kicker till the end. You want to really mess somebody up, draft a kicker in the first round in fantasy. Everybody will be looking at you like, what?
Right. Sebastian Janikowski.
Yeah, unless that's what I was going to say. Unless you're Sebastian Janikowski, you're probably not getting drafted. He was drafted in what, the second or third round?
I think it was a first rounder for the Raiders.
Was it first? Okay.
Yeah, they shocked the world by taking a kicker in the first round. Yeah.
Well, he turned out to be a pretty damn good kicker.
Pretty damn good kicker, right.
Yeah. Kicked the hell out of the ball for a long time.
There are a couple of really strong-legged kickers in this draft, or who are draft eligible, who probably won't get drafted at all. Okay. But with our last pick, 257, okay, do we go out and get a guy that we're probably just going to cut anyway? Or do we draft a kicker, keep him on the practice squad, for when that hiccup eventually comes that our kicker loses confidence, and we don't have to worry about losing a game at the end because our kicker can't make a 35-yard field goal, right? So I don't know. For me, I'd be looking more at kickers with these late picks.
I would say that the Browns are in more of a position than most teams to draft a kicker because of that pick being near the very end of the draft. The chances of other kickers being picked ahead of that, very slim. And the Browns want competition. So if they don't use that pick somewhere else, and that pick has almost no value. That pick has 1 point worth of value. So so it's, it can help them move up, or they can trade it out for a 7th rounder next year, or maybe a 6th. It would make sense. It's a good thought for them to use that on a kicker, or on a third corner, or on a second wide receiver to bring somebody in. I definitely agree with you there.
Guy's going to be on the practice squad anyway, right? So I don't know. Made sense to me.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Definitely. Yeah. Shoot, I had something else now it's slipped my mind, which isn't unusual. But I want to talk about Clowney real quick here.
Yeah.
Actually, before that, I know what I was going to ask you is the Browns. We talked about Wyatt Teller, J.C. Treader. Now we've been concentrating on this tackle position, but you even talked about it with Emory a little bit. An interior offensive lineman. What are your thoughts on Josh Myers out of Ohio State? And I'm bringing Josh Myers up for a couple reasons. He's Ohio State. He's also from Miamisburg, which is the town over where I used to live. I know some people who know him and stuff. But he started out as a guard at Ohio State, moved to center. I mean, he's a mauler. He's 6'5", 312. He's not going to tap dance. He's gonna maul people down. I'm picturing him like Wyatt Teller type of guy. Not comparing him to Wyatt Teller, but I think he's closer to that mold than he is to a finesse guy. And I think he's projected kind of third, fourth round. So what are your thoughts on him? If he's there at the right spot as a developmental guy for the Browns.
Here's the problem I have is that when we look at developmental offensive linemen, we're typically looking at tackles moving into guard, not vice versa. And to really be able to give yourself flexibility, I think the Browns have a lot of guards right now on the roster that can play, that have played. Not necessarily someone who can step in for one of our starters. I don't know if Nick Harris is in that conversation yet. But I see the immediate need at tackle this year.
I'm talking taking him in addition to a tackle. Yeah.
Yeah. And anytime I've gone through the mocks, I've looked at all offensive linemen. And if we're into those later rounds and, we've got pretty much our needs addressed, or we just don't like guys that are there for any of our needs, then I would definitely look to interior linemen. I think, we're going to have a need there.
Yeah.
Not this year probably, but probably next year or the year after, we're going to have a need there. I mean, if he's there in those mid-round picks and there's just, nobody else that we like, or if he drops down to, one of either our late fourth or our fifth, okay, yeah, for sure. I think that'd be a great pickup.
Yeah, I think he's a guy who could start, relatively quickly at center or guard. Yeah, is my thought. So
if that's the case, he's probably going to be gone in the third round.
Yeah, I think he's projected in the third round, but you never know. I mean, a guy who successfully played guard and center at Ohio State,
right.
He should be pretty highly regarded. So we'll see. He may go to the top of the third round, but just kind of want to get your thoughts. He's not a name who I've heard really anybody talk about. So, Clowney signs, and I think you and I talked about this a little bit, especially with Sheldon Richardson being cut, whether Clowney's going to play some inside, whether Miles might play a little bit inside, what the Browns are going to do. And I don't know if you heard, did you hear the press conference today with Stefanski?
No.
Okay, he had his press conference today, and Fred Greetham actually asked him about that. And it's a press conference, so he really didn't get a good answer, I don't think. But he did ask him about that. So I thought it was kind of cool. We're all kind of thinking the same thing. Are we going to see Miles and Clowney and are we going to see 3 defensive ends out there along with with 1 defensive tackle, or maybe even a 5-man front at times? I think is the thought. So definitely interesting there.
Yeah, depending on how the draft unfolds, there are a lot of ways that Joe Woods could go with some of these hybrid guys, depending on who we end up taking. And I think just like we've seen in the past, despite our best efforts to diagnose exactly what the Browns are going to do in the draft, we're probably not going to be right about any of them. So it's going to be a question of how do they deploy the people that they end up with, right?
We don't even know what they think they need right now.
Right.
We don't.
Which is really good. I mean, compared to the past when there were all kinds of media leaks and so forth. They're playing it really close to the vest now. But Zaven Collins, the conversation that we had with Emory on him was interesting. He's one of those examples of a guy who can sort of change the way your defense plays.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a guy that can put his hand in the dirt and move Clowney inside. I mean, are we thinking Curtis Weaver's going to do that? Maybe. I don't know. But I think the more tools that Joe Woods has and the more options he has, the more potentially hard our defense is to diagnose and figure out. And I think those are all really positive things. I think what we saw last year was a very predictable, very safe NFL defense that was driven by the personnel that we had. Hopefully this year and then succeeding years, the defense starts to take on more of a personality.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see who gets shots and who, it depends who gets which positions they draft if some of these guys even get a shot. So
yeah, exactly.
It's very, very interesting. But,
it will be.
Just want to mention, I tweeted a picture of my beer fridge a couple days ago, and I had a lot of people because I just restocked it. It's getting. I say it's getting warm out. We're expecting like 3 inches of snow tonight now.
Yeah.
So, fun stuff. But a lot of people ask me about this Hop and Frog Mango Turbo Shandy Citrus Ale, which I got as a birthday gift, and I hadn't even had one yet. So I had one tonight, and it's a good drink, guys. I gotta be honest, it doesn't taste like a beer to me. It tastes almost like it tastes like a kind of like a mixed drink, like a kind of closer to a like an orange what do we want to say, an orange daiquiri or something like that, maybe.
Wow.
I mean it tastes good. I liked it, but didn't really have a whole lot of beer taste to me. So it depends what you like. If you're a strict beer drinker and you don't like stuff that's fruity or is like too far out of balance from being a beer, you're not going to like this. But if you're into trying different drinks and stuff and just like really good flavors and things, you'll probably love this. So it all depends. Definitely a different kind of a beer though.
Nice.
Of course, it's a shandy. It's not a beer, so I guess should say that.
Well, we get past this last little cold snap here, and I'll probably start joining you in a beer on these nights. But I don't have a lot out in the fridge right now, so I'm gonna have to go out and pick some things up.
Well, since you're not on Twitter, I'll shoot you the picture I have so you can see my stuff.
There you go.
And,
good.
All right. Well, we've been going at it for a while. I think it was great talking with Emory and getting some stuff out there. We've had a lot of fun kicking some of this other stuff around, and we've got you on record, Jeff, as far as what your perfect draft is. So we're not too far away from the draft. So
right.
All right.
From Thursday.
Yeah. So anything you want to close with, Jeff?
Yeah, I want to tell everybody out there that's listening that my first experience in doing an interview tonight gave me a newfound respect for what you do every week, Rod. I'm a commentator. I have opinions. I don't ask people questions. It's not as easy as you make it sound. So you may have sort of set me up for that, but that's fine. I appreciate what you do.
Well, thanks, Jeff. You know what? The only way I learned how to do this was by doing it. I was not anybody who could interview anybody when I started doing this. And in fact, it'd probably be fun for me to go back and listen to the first couple of these I did and just to hear how bad I was at it. So, but I thought you did a great job, and we got some great information from Emory. So
great. Well, thanks.
So nice work, and we're gonna close up shop. This has been the Browns Blitz, and we will catch you next time.